Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Businessology Show. So, we've been doing some education. I've been teaching on the show a little bit, but we still love to have great guests that know something about the agency space. And Joe Koufman is going to be joining us today, and he's the CEO of Setup. He came actually right like last year when we were in the middle of the pandemic. And so we're going to get some great insight into the agency space. But I just want to introduce Joe. So this is wild. He's responsible for 3 married couples and countless business relationships hooking up. So in early 2014, he played on his passion to connect people, and he set up the company called Setup. And he's a marketing matchmaker. So we had, Joe on the show back in January. So we're going to find out what a marketing matchmaker is. So, Joe, thanks for joining us on the show, man. Again, I appreciate you being here.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jason. It's such a pleasure to see you again and be back on the show.
Yeah, very cool. So what's a marketing matchmaker? What does Setup do? That's something that'll really help us to get through the rest of our questions too.
Yeah. Well, as you said in my bio, I love connecting people together, and I've been doing it a long time. And so a little over 8 years ago, I started Setup to connect brands and marketing agencies. That's the primary thing. When we say marketing matchmakers, it's usually connecting a brand and an agency together, but a lot of times it's connecting marketers to each other as well.
Yeah. So when you say connecting a brand to an agency, you're basically saying there's a large, maybe Fortune 500 company brand that's looking for their agency of record, or they probably don't do agencies of record that much anymore. They're choosing different strengths, right? In agencies, they're trying to find them. They'll come to you and say, we need this type of help. Go find them. And that's what you do?
Exactly. So the way our process works is we usually have a conversation with the client to try to uncover what they need most from a marketing perspective. And usually the things they need are they're short capacity. They don't have enough arms and legs to do the marketing activities they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
Or they're short of capability. They're missing some specific capability within their team or within their current agency roster. And so the way we work is we help them write a brief. We work with them.
Cool.
We send them a questionnaire that they fill out with what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
And then we decide whether we, within our roster of agencies, have an agency or agencies that are a good fit to solve that exact problem or not. And if the answer is yes, that we have some agencies that can solve that exact problem that the client just outlined with us, then we'll typically make 3 or 4 introductions for that client.
Okay.
And the reason we make 3 or 4 is, any good matchmaker will tell you that a good match is not just on paper and capability in the agency world. It's also chemistry.
Yeah.
And we can say, hey, here are 3 or 4 agencies that are all a good fit on paper for you, and they have the capability. You choose the one that's the best for you and your team.
Yeah, very cool. And so it sounds like you figured out some area of the market where brands aren't, they know, I guess they can't choose an agency themselves, or they struggle to do it, or do they not know they can't choose and they need somebody like you to help them choose? Or
there are a couple of problems that we're solving. One is, I think people are limited by their network. Usually when a client thinks about hiring an agency, they ask around a couple of their colleagues within the company.
I see. Okay.
You might ask a former colleague that's at another company now. And the challenge is, are you really finding the best agency for you with that? And you could certainly do a Google search and try to find agencies like that. And how about 20 million results for agencies that, and the problem is that agencies say they're good at everything and they're not.
Right.
And so we put the agencies through a really rigorous vetting process up front to hone in on what they do just really well. And by the way, we don't trust the agency just to tell us what they do really well. We ask the clients of the agency and former clients of the agency. So we do this whole agency assessment up front to hone in on what the agencies truly do best. And then when we're having a conversation with a client, we know in the back of our mind which agencies we think are a good fit for that specific need. But
Okay.
then we validate it, through that brief and
Mm,
then make introductions. Now, if the client comes to us and we don't have agencies that are a good fit,
mm.
we can also conduct the full RFI, RFP process, request for information, request for
I
proposal,
see. Okay.
which the client's going to pay us to run a 3-month process where we narrow
Yeah.
down a big pool of agencies, narrow it down, narrow it down, narrow it down.
Yeah.
3 or 4 agencies pitch the client, and then they ultimately choose. But
Okay.
we call that our custom agency search, and that's typically
Yeah.
when they're asking for something that's outside of the capability of the agencies that we work with.
Yeah. That makes sense. So, in that second part, that agency search, that full search, that's a more difficult thing you have to do because you have to go search the market and
Yeah.
try to find what they're looking for instead of just pulling from the pool of agencies you already have on in your roster, I guess.
Yeah, we're working on 2 of those right now. One for a really large sporting goods company in the Northwest, Pacific Northwest,
Yeah.
and one for a really large. They've got thousands of, we'll just say like uh, a retail
Mm.
services
Yeah.
company. Both of those companies were in the middle of a 3-month search process to find them the right
Wow.
agency. In that case, the client is paying us to run that process, and we're super transparent about the agencies that pay us our monthly retainer, so
Okay.
that if they want to include a couple of the agencies because we think they're a good fit, fine. If they want
Yeah.
to not include them, that's fine too.
Mm.
But it's been a lot of fun for us to, at the end of the day, our job is to help the client find the right agency to support them.
Mm.
Sometimes that means we've got one of those agencies already in our roster, and sometimes we got to
Yeah.
do that full custom agency search, as we call it.
Yeah. You know what's interesting? The value of your business is found in agencies. Actually, they don't position themselves well, right? I think, and I guess no businesses really do, but a lot of people expect agencies to be good at that, and they're just notoriously not good at that. Which a lot of people who have been in the space long enough know they just want to, just like everybody, slap all the stuff on the website as much as they can. And so you have to actually go, the website's probably not completely accurate, so I got to probably talk to somebody to really figure out what they're very good at. I mean, that's just true across the space. They're just not good at positioning themselves.
We hear over and over that old phrase, "The cobbler's kids have no
Yep.
shoes."
Yep.
And we developed an offering specifically for agencies to help with that, called our marketing diagnostic.
Mm.
And the purpose of it was because we kept being approached by agencies to say, help us figure out, our website, our social, and all of that.
Yeah.
Because part of the problem is that I think a lot of marketing agencies do a poor job of differentiating themselves. And maybe it's just that there's not enough words in the English language to describe what an agency does, a marketing
Yeah.
agency does. But we work with agencies to help them, to your point, Jason, do some differentiation in addition, and figure out how to best position themselves for growth.
Yeah.
We also do a business development training seminar
Mm.
that is designed to talk agencies through. The first part is, how do you position yourself for growth? The second part is,
Yeah.
what infrastructure and tools and people and processes do you use to do
Mm.
business development? And then the third part is outreach and closing. What
Yeah.
kinds of things should you be doing? What are the occasions that it's okay for an agency business development person to reach out to
Yeah.
a potential client on an ongoing basis?
Yeah. And I think it's tough work to do, right? To do positioning, to do outreach. It's very process oriented. So it's got to recur on your calendar. And it's tough to know because nowadays we can't really hit people in their email or LinkedIn messaging, which, that just gets called spam immediately. So, I mean, should people still network? We used to all network at the chamber. You still got to do stuff in person, right? How do you do networking now and
Yeah.
outreach?
Well, to your point, Jason, there's a science and there's an art.
Yeah.
right? The science is, what are the mechanics of doing agency business development? What are the
Yeah.
steps and tools and the
Mm-hmm.
processes? And then the art part, the creative part is, what is the right message that would resonate with a potential client? And how
Yeah.
do you get past the, I'm trying to sell you something,
Yeah.
and to the, tell me more about what you're trying to accomplish from a marketing perspective.
Yeah.
One of the greatest questions, I heard an agency person say to a client, this was back from my agency days, is, in a year from now, what will make you look back on this relationship as a huge success?
Yeah.
Maybe that's a good question for anybody in
That's a
business to ask.
great question. Yeah. That's
Or
that
2 years
actually.
from now. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a similar question in our value conversation. It's saying, if we ask you a year from now, was this a great, was this a great partnership, and you say yes, definitely, what is going to make you answer so
Mm-hmm.
definitively about our relationship? But that's just a lot of strategic thought, and I guess there's a lot of agencies out there they're just trying to get their next cash flow to pay payroll, and that leads to a lot of reactionary behavior. Are agencies in general just not strategic thinkers about their business development outreach, or do they just not have the money or the know-how, the knowledge?
Yeah, it depends. I mean, I think some agencies have much more of a growth mindset than others. And
Yeah.
I think that the largest difference is, does the CEO or founder or principal
Mm.
of the agency really care about growth? And if the
Okay.
answer is yes, then they do the things that they need to do. So, for example, we won't work with an agency that doesn't have a dedicated business development person.
Ah, okay.
And
Okay.
at least one, if not more. And the
Yeah,
reason is
makes sense.
that when we work with agencies that don't, when we used to work with agencies that don't have a business development person, and we're working with the CEO or somebody like that, sometimes she's got time to follow up on these important introductions that we're making. And sometimes she's dealing with fires, you
Yeah,
know, a client issue
good
or a
point.
staff issue or
Yeah.
whatever. And if we're helping the agency get the ball to the 20-yard line for this
Yeah.
client, so to speak, somebody's got to get it from the 20-yard line into the end zone, or at least try.
Oh,
And
yeah. Yeah.
so but it's, at the end of the day, for us, we really want to focus on helping the client find the best possible agency partner for them, because if
Yeah.
we're serving the client, then the agencies that we work with will certainly benefit.
Okay. I mean, are the clients, that is the brands looking for agencies, are those really your primary client, or are agencies also your client, or what do
We,
you
we
call those two?
Yeah, we call brands clients and we
Okay.
call them agency partners. And we do
Okay.
that because at the end of the day, um, we're helping the client get to the right agency or agencies,
Yeah.
or the right ecosystem of agencies, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
Yeah.
But the reality is, mostly we are paid by agencies to connect with potential clients,
Okay.
but we call them clients, we call them brands, and then we
Yeah.
call them
Okay.
agency partners.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, I guess in a perfect world, maybe your job wouldn't be necessary if agencies were perfect and they served perfectly every client, right? That means a brand may not be searching for another agency. Is that true? Or why do
Yeah,
they switch, and why can't agencies be better partners for their brands and clients?
yeah. Well, we do an annual marketing relationship survey, and we published, last year's survey. We were fortunate that Ad Age picked up the survey, and the headline
Nice.
was, 1 in 3 brands will be looking for a new agency within the next 6 months. And
Wow. Wow.
we kind of laughed when they pulled that, of all of the insights we extracted in our
Yeah.
marketing. That was like the big headline. And the reason I chuckle that they picked up on that is, I think maybe at any given moment in time within the
Yeah.
next 6 months, a third
Right.
of clients are looking for a
Okay.
new agent.
Okay.
Um, yeah,
That's
to your
funny.
point, I think things change,
Yeah.
things change, people change.
Yeah.
We've grown apart, Jason. I just don't know if this
It
relationship
happens.
is going to work out the way
It
it did
happens.
when we were young.
It's not you, it's me.
It's not you, it's me. But I mean, there are so many analogies between dating and relationships and agency client relationships. Communication, transparency, vulnerability.
Yeah.
These are all attributes that expectations and communications may be the two most
Yeah.
important things that affect a relationship, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes the client grows beyond the capabilities of a specific email,
Yeah.
of a specific agency. Sorry,
Yeah.
email into my inbox right now. Sometimes needs evolve
Yeah.
for the client, right?
Yeah.
Like we've bought a new division, we've launched a new product,
Yeah. Yeah.
so things change in the
Yeah.
world, things change in the relationship that lead to clients wanting to make a switch, and that benefits agencies that are there to offer whatever new thing the client needs, and
Yeah.
that hurts the agency that maybe existed. Often we're helping a client replace agencies. We rarely work with companies small enough that this is the first time they've ever worked with an agency.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense because that's just the most value for setup, the company. You know what your value is, and you're just not helping a 5-person agency kind of get their marketing off the ground, so to speak.
Yeah,
You need
or a
people
five.
that are established,
Yeah, but actually, same thing for clients. I mean,
Okay.
the
Yeah.
smallest, a small chain of coffee shops, when they tell you that their budget is $50,000 for marketing,
Yeah.
you can bet all they ever have is $50,000.
Yeah.
Whereas if a much larger company tells you that they have a little project for $50,000, there is a high likelihood that there's a bunch more opportunity within that
Yeah.
company beyond that
Okay.
initial $1,000.
Yeah, that makes sense. So there was a question I had written down about the importance of peer relationships in marketers and marketers really having a community to kind of learn from. And it sounds like you do a lot of that. There's probably a lot of education, I imagine, in your business. And it's wild. I'm understanding that there's a lot of trust that you sort through, right? Trust is pretty strong with a brand and an agency choosing one another. And so they'll choose on a whim when really they may not should have chosen one another. And you're brokering the trust of where they need to place their trust. So how do these brands, how do they build their trust? I mean, obviously they can be educated by somebody like you. Do they have a peer community they can go to and network? How do they get better at choosing agencies, I guess?
Yeah. Well, you loaded like 6 questions into that one question.
That's a lot.
I'll try to pick apart the
Yeah,
onion.
pick those apart.
The short answer is we are able to build trust with the client that we're going to help them find the right agency or agencies to support them.
Yeah.
And that's the first step is, look, we're trying to help you find an agency that fits, because if we make bad introductions,
Yeah.
they're not going to come back to us again when they need more help from in a different area. So we have clients that have come to us 3 or 4 different times. First time they maybe needed a CRM agency that could help them with marketing automation and CRM. Then they come back to us and say, "Oh, now we need a bunch of content to be able to market, to do our email marketing and such." And then, I need PR support. We need web design and development. We need, so they are paid digital media. So we found that when we make good introductions for the client, they'll come back to us again and again next time they need additional agency support. But you also asked a question about peer relationships and trust, and we want to be a kind of a trusted resource for clients that helps them. We want to be sought after by marketers to help them connect with the right people and the right resources.
Yeah.
That's our vision for our company, is really to be the trusted confidant for marketers to help them find the right resources. And sometimes those resources are agencies. Sometimes they're other people. Sometimes we're connecting marketers to each other. One of the things I'm thinking a lot about lately, Jason, and that we're thinking about launching some kind of an offering that allows marketers to connect with each other on a peer
Oh, cool.
relationship basis. So
Okay.
there are a bunch of them out there that are really good. And CMO Club is
Yeah.
one
Okay.
that was acquired by Salesforce.com. So that tells you
Wow.
how valuable and important it was. Salesforce
Wow.
bought them.
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
but there's a bunch of groups of marketing peers. And I think many marketers are relatively extroverted people. Not to make a huge generalization, because I know a lot of great introverted
Yeah, for
marketers,
sure.
but I think as marketers, we like to share stories, as you can
Mm-hmm.
imagine, and we like to connect with others that to share best practices and to share challenges. When I started my company, it became clear to me that I no longer had any direct peers. When you work for a big company and you're a vice president, you
Mm.
have other vice presidents you can ask about things and you get help from them. But
Yeah.
when you become an entrepreneur, unless you're a part of one of these entrepreneur groups like
Yeah.
EO, Entrepreneurs
EO.
Organization,
Yep.
yeah, or I can't think of the
Vistage or
other one.
whatever.
Vistage, thank you,
Yep.
Vistage, or something like that.
Yep.
Those are great, but for a
Mm-hmm.
marketing leader who's
Yeah.
the senior marketing person in the organization, you may not have a lot of other marketing leaders in the organization. There's the head of
Yeah,
HR and
for
the head of
sure.
supply chain management
Yeah.
and CFO and CEO.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that marketing leaders need to have a group that could be their, let's call it a virtual board of advisors for
Yeah.
the person, you
Hmm.
know.
Yeah.
And so, how does a marketing leader find those peers that are dealing with the same challenges and issues that they're having? And I'm not convinced that there's a perfect solution in the market today to
Yeah.
really connect them together.
Yeah, yeah. One thing that's hitting me that you're kind of referencing is that people in these marketing roles need support from leadership above them, and we've heard from some internal CMOs and things like that that the executive team doesn't know what the heck they do.
Yeah.
They're probably more technically focused on, say, a product that they've built or something like that, and marketing's like, give me some money to support this, and they're like, yeah, what do y'all do over there? And I've heard the CMO parts of these brands may feel alone and struggle. And you
Yeah.
referenced it on the agency side too. A business developer can be like, if there's no executive support, it's like, hey, can you go get us some more money? And just go get us more money, whatever that means. And they're like, I need you to help me move some of these key, relationships, into the end zone. And so the support is a huge part.
Yeah.
It sounds like you provide some of that to them, I
Yeah.
guess.
Well, to your point about agencies, I've heard agency CEOs say they want to hire a rainmaker, and that always
Yeah.
makes me do. A rainmaker, I mean, there's no such thing. If you're hiring a business development person because
Interesting.
they have a book of business or they have, a network or a good Rolodex,
Mm.
that's a mistake, because the
Wow.
reality is that is finite and not scalable.
Mm.
What you
That's
want
interesting.
is you want a business development person that has a process, a system,
That's
because
cool.
the reality is a system is repeatable. We call it, when we do business development for agencies and help them with that, we call it our
Mm.
sustainable pipeline process. It's a process where we find the right opportunity on an ongoing basis for them. It's not magic.
Mm. Right.
It's not Rolodex. We have a process where we can find the right opportunities and connect them with the right. But from the marketing support from leadership within the client side, within the brands, we've done this series of content called the CMO Spotlight, which we
Mm.
started right at the beginning of the pandemic. We've published, I think, 36 or 37 of them. We
Mm.
have another 10 that we've recorded that haven't even published. And we ask
Wow.
all of these marketing leaders for major brands, like Heineken and Pearl Vision and
Man, yeah.
like Papa John's Pizza, top companies.
Mm.
We ask them all the same questions on purpose, because then we can also do these mashup videos where we can have 5 or 6 CMOs all answer the same exact
Yeah,
question
yeah,
right in a row.
yeah.
But one of the questions that we ask in that interview is, hey, marketing is often seen as a cost center,
Yeah.
and marketing is often, how do you explain the value of marketing to the non-marketing functions within your organization? So for the
Good question.
CFO, so the CFO that maybe holds the budget ultimately, or the CEO,
Yeah.
or how do you explain it? And the reality is, I've heard lots of different answers from CMOs, but many of them are about letting those other functions into the kimono, so to speak, and
Okay.
letting them be a part of the process, so that
Yeah.
they're invested in marketing, and then also really focusing on leveraging marketing as a driver of value versus a cost center. You mentioned that kind of right at the
Yeah.
beginning of this conversation, which is marketers that really show it's not just about showing ROI, it's about driving value for the organization.
Yeah.
I'm going
That's
to give
wild.
you I want to give you one quick example
Yeah.
that surprised me. We've interviewed several marketing leaders that were head of marketing for a large major restaurant chain.
Mm-hmm.
And what I didn't realize is that oftentimes the head of marketing is also the head of product development within a restaurant chain. So,
Wow.
for example, new menu items and coming up with new menu items. And, it's a wonder that some of these CMOs aren't 300 pounds, because I'm sure they're having to taste all the new foods and products that they're
Wow.
launching. But often the head of marketing is involved in product development, because
Wow.
they're listening really closely to what the customers are wanting and
That's
buying,
wild.
and then they're helping develop a product that they want. So talk about value driving
Yeah.
real value for the organization. It's super easy to show the value when you said, hey, we created and launched this new product into the market because we heard the customer asking for it.
Yeah.
And now we're selling a million Gordita Crunch Wraps. I mean, bad example, but it's been fun to have these conversations and understand how marketing can really drive value for the entire organization.
I love it. You've hit on a couple things that are really first time I've ever heard some of this stuff, which is on the agency side, somebody trying to hire, a rainmaker, and you're like, that does not exist. I've never heard anybody say that, because I still hear the rainmaker phrase. And now you're
Right.
telling me internally on the brand side, you're telling me marketers have to really dip their toe in a lot of aspects of the business, even product development in a restaurant. I never would have thought that. But what it leads me to is the value of what you do, which is when you're hooking up relationships, it is specific, right? It's like if you have a restaurant chain, you really do need an agency with experience in that area to understand that CMO, referencing product development, menu building, what that means. Because the menu, it all ends up on that menu in front of somebody coming into the restaurant. That's where that marketing finally lands, and is across all chains, right? And is it what our customer base wanted? Does it produce more value? And so it's just wild, the things you're saying. And it's so cool that a business like yours exists. And so what I want to do is ask you, because you see a lot of different things in the market. We had you on the show back in 2021, January. So that was a year, 3 or 4 months ago when this show comes out. How has the agency market changed? That's what I want to talk about a little bit. And so that we're going to have to ask some specific questions. I don't know if you have a high level view that you could just say to our listeners, hey, here's what I'm seeing about the agency space, because our listeners are agency owners. And so what can you tell them just to start out at a high level of what you're seeing in the market?
Yeah. Well, couple things here. Number one, there's a lot of consolidation happening in the agency business, and
Okay.
I
Yeah.
think in a good way. What I'm
Okay.
seeing a lot of is that medium-sized agencies that are missing some capabilities
Mm,
are gobbling up some small shops because
mm,
they are missing some key part. So, for
yeah.
example, one of the we've actually helped some. We've done a little bit of the agency acquisition business where we're
Ah.
helping an agency identify small agencies to acquire to fill a
Mm,
gap. And so we had a deal
cool.
happen last year where we helped an agency identify several small agencies that might be a fit. And then they actually acquired one of the small agencies um, based on our introducing them. Marketing matchmakers, lots of different
Wow.
ways we do,
Very
right?
cool. Very cool.
Um, but it was one of those where this agency was really good at a lot of things, but was missing one key capability. And in some cases, um, they're trying to buy a small agency because of that missing capability. In some cases, it's a talent acquisition because
Mm,
we
yeah.
all are hearing the talent wars or the Great
Yep.
Resignation. It's
Yep.
hard to find. Imagine trying to hire an account person, project manager, copywriter, art director,
Mm,
front end developer.
yeah.
Trying to hire all those roles almost impossible. But you could
Yeah.
certainly buy a small agency that has all those functions within
For
the
sure.
agency and be able
Okay.
to in one fell swoop. But the other thing is geographic diversity. Sometimes a larger agency buys a small agency because they want to get into a market that they're not
Mm,
in. Sometimes it's to get into a specific client or clients, right? Like,
yeah.
oh, you're doing a ton of work for Coca-Cola. We
Yeah.
always wanted to work on Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
We're going to buy you to get into Coca-Cola, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of reasons why, but we're seeing a lot of that consolidation, and it's usually for a specific capability gap that the agency has.
Okay.
Um, the other thing is there's this pendulum that swings back and forth every couple of years,
Mm,
and I'm seeing it swing again, which is particularly larger clients, larger brands trying to build an in-house agency.
yeah.
Sometimes they'll buy an agency.
Yeah.
Sometimes they will just poach people from different agencies and start
Yeah.
to build a team. And they usually do it as a shared service, meaning
Mm,
multiple brands within the company would go to that internal agency just like you'd go to an external agency to get support.
yeah.
The challenge with this model is that an internal agency is not an agency.
Mm,
And the reason it's not an agency is that the kinds of people that go to work for an agency are often interested in working on multiple brands and multiple different
that makes
industries.
sense. Yeah. I've heard
They
that.
like the diversity of today working on CPG and tomorrow working on
Yeah.
automotive and the day
Yeah.
after working on, food and beverage or something
Yeah.
different.
Mm-hmm.
And but so as brands have started to bring a lot of that marketing function in house, and then due to the pandemic, a lot of them furloughed or laid off some marketing
Yep.
team, and so now they're searching for agencies. We are crazy busy now,
Huh.
right? With brands that need agency support. They're coming to us and saying, I need help, and I need help now because they're leaner teams and they have fewer total resources to do, in some cases, twice as many projects because the economy is heating up and they're
I see.
busy,
Yeah.
but they don't have the staff to do it. They either don't have the capacity, usually, or they don't have
Yeah.
the capability. And so they're leaning.
Mm,
So you know, the internal shared service agency team is swamped and not producing the quality and volume of output that the internal clients need,
mm.
and therefore they're seeking external support. So we're seeing convergence of a lot of different things
Yeah.
happening all in the market, but it's
Yeah.
exciting. It's a really exciting time for agencies because they're needed more than ever.
Mm,
If they're small, they're a potential acquisition target. If they're large, then they have 17 open headcount and they're having a hard time filling those positions.
mm. Yeah.
So it's a really fun time right now.
Very cool. Well, okay, so a lot of stuff you said. I have some questions about that. So you said on the agency side, you're seeing a lot of consolidations happen, and it makes sense just because of our market and how it's fallen out. You said, and I think it's a good thing. Are you saying why is it a good thing? Like, are there some mediocre agencies that kind of need to get swallowed up? We need to clean this space up a little bit. Is that why you said it's probably a good thing, or?
Um, so I think it's a really good thing because it's usually the result of, hey, I've got a client or client's interest to execute something that we're not good at,
Yeah.
and there's a smaller shop out there that is really good at that thing.
Yeah.
And if we, I always think of that book by Shel Silverstein, The Missing Piece.
Yeah.
You go out and in many cases the medium size, mostly medium sized agencies, because the big holding companies have an agency that does everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The small agencies are maybe specialists at good at one or two things, but those medium sized agencies, and I mean, 100-person agency, 150-person agency,
Mm-hmm.
200-person agency,
Yeah.
um, are sometimes missing one key thing or one
Yeah.
key capability. And so, if you're a small agency that's a specialist, you may be excited about getting acquired so that you can work on bigger clients with bigger problems and apply that specialty that you have, that expertise, to a wider range of clients.
Yeah.
And I think obviously a small agency is not going to sell unless they feel it's good in their best interest
For sure.
also.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think we're seeing some really valuable and really capable agencies that can, in many cases, compete really well and outperform the holding company agencies because they do have a wide range of
Wow.
capabilities and skills.
Yeah.
And candidly, the holding company agencies have so much bloat, and they are focused on, if you're a medium-sized client, I mean, even $1 billion client, which
Yeah.
is, the company, you might be the 17th or 18th most important
Yeah.
client for the holding company agencies. And
Yeah.
therefore you're getting the 23-year-olds working on your account.
Right. You're not Ford, right? If you're not Ford, you're gonna, even though you're this
Right.
massive Fortune 500 company, they're putting those young people that they hired on your account with little experience, and so it's wild seeing. And I just want to restate kind of what you said in the market. I know we talked about the client side where they're thinking about consolidations. That makes sense, but on the brand side, a lot of them, and we know a few years ago, they started pulling agencies in-house, before the pandemic. And now they had to furlough. And so now they're needing outside agency help. They don't want to restaff, I guess, their marketing team internally. So they're trying to get some help from agencies. And so it's just moving faster, I guess, for you. They're trying to choose those relationships. And when you choose relationships quickly, you do bypass the trusted part, right? You just kind of skip over things and you're like, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine. And that leads to long-term struggles later. And I guess what you guys do is you're like, let us match you up, which is really matchmaking is a trusted hookup, right? It's like, this is probably going to be who you're looking for. We think this is the right relationship for you. So super valuable what you guys do.
Yeah, I think clients look at us as a way to consider options that they wouldn't have found on their own or considered on their
Mm.
own, and they do trust us to help them figure out
Mm.
the landscape too. And
Yeah.
I want to just take a minute to talk about that. We
Yeah.
have service that we've been delivering to clients that was unexpected. I didn't expect that we would ever be doing work like this, but right now for a Fortune 500 company, there's a new VP of marketing, and she has 8 direct reports, and each of
Mm.
those direct reports have other direct reports, and
Yeah.
it's a complex business with a complex landscape. And
Hmm.
she said, I need to understand this entire landscape. Like, how is marketing working with sales and product and the other groups within the company? And
Mm-hmm.
so we were asked to come in and interview a bunch of key people within the company, as well as survey a bunch of other people in the company to help kind of paint a picture of what the perfect marketing ecosystem should look like for them. What
Wow.
does Nirvana look like?
Yeah.
And by ecosystem, what we mean is, what is the right balance with internal resources and external agency partners, or even software platforms and
Yeah.
vendors, but
Yeah.
mostly focus on those agency relationships to support the movement towards that nirvana that we talked
Yeah.
about. And so it's been fascinating as we've done more and more of this work, because they're not ready to hire an agency yet. They
Oh,
need to
wow.
understand what the buckets are. Where are the empty buckets that we need to fill? And then once we identify where the empty buckets are, we setup could help you fill those buckets. But you're
Mm.
not ready yet. You need to understand what nirvana looks like for you, and then you need to understand some of the steps to get there.
Mm.
And part of that might mean that there are some agencies that you're not working with today that you should be.
Mm.
But this is kind of pre-work before you can even do an agency search.
Yeah, and I never would have thought about that either, because you want to hook people up, right? That's how you're making money. But they said, or somebody, this VP of marketing was wise enough to say, I think something's wrong internally. Can you check us up? Like, we need a checkup first. And
Yep.
so you had to develop a way to check them up, and you concluded they're not ready to hire an agency. Like,
Well,
I mean,
I
that's wild.
no, what we're really identifying is a bunch of gaps. So let me give you an example for this
Okay.
particular client, without giving away their details.
Yeah.
There are 3 roles that we've identified on their internal team that they don't have today that they should have.
Okay.
Because, like for an example, marketing has taken on tons and tons of projects that are being thrown over the fence by sales, by product, by other groups,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
and they're just busy doing all these tons of projects without really taking a step back and prioritizing which projects are part of the larger marketing
Yeah.
goals for organization. So,
Okay.
for example, they need to hire a sheriff that's going to
Ah.
say, these 3 things are in our roadmap and part of our
Ah.
priority from a
I
marketing
see.
perspective. But then there's other 10 things that go on the back of the queue because they're not
Yeah.
super crucial. And then the other thing is, today, this client might be working with some agencies that aren't really ideal for their needs.
Yeah.
And so I think, the output we're saying is, yeah, they are ready to hire some agencies now at this point,
Okay.
because we've identified where those gaps are.
I see.
They didn't know where the gaps existed until we went through the work. And this is a case where the client pays us to do this planning and this work up front.
Mm.
And then now we've identified some of those gaps where an agency could support. They can choose to come back to us again and have us help them fill those buckets with the right agencies.
Mm.
And I think they will in this case, because they're missing some things that they need.
That is very cool. Man, it's wild, all the stuff you guys do at setup. So as we're kind of closing out here, like, how, do would is it cost money for an agency to come in and say, hey, put me in your space so you can choose me when you find out a brand needs a new agency? Do they just sign up?
Yeah. So the short answer is, we are paid a monthly retainer. We are paid
Okay.
an upfront fee for the agency assessment that we put each agency through
Yeah.
up front.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're paid a monthly retainer to connect them with potential clients on an ongoing basis.
Okay.
But there are some pretty strict criteria that we have to
Mm.
determine if we'll work with an agency on that
Okay.
ongoing basis. We can do the agency assessment or the marketing diagnostic we talked about, or the business
Mm.
development training, with
Yeah.
any agency that wants to hire us to do that specific piece.
Yeah. Okay.
But that sustainable pipeline process, that retainer, where we find them opportunity on an ongoing basis.
Okay.
They have to have at least 50 full-time employees.
Okay.
They have to have at least one dedicated business development person.
Okay.
And they have to have a very differentiated offering that, makes them special, makes them somewhat unique.
Okay.
And the reason
cool.
those three criteria is that we found that when we work with a really small agency, a 15, 20 person agency, again, there's not a dedicated business development person. They don't necessarily have the scale to be able to really take on some of these larger clients that we're working on that may have a national or global campaign.
Yeah.
And so we want to work with agencies that have a certain size or scale and a certain maturity, I guess, as an agency organization. Agencies have to be a certain size to hire their first business development person, where the CEO is not, and
that's right.
That's usually 25, 30 people is that point where you say, okay, I'm ready to hire a BD person.
Yeah.
And some agencies think that we're there to replace a business development person. Absolutely not.
Okay.
We're adding, fuel to the top of the funnel, and we're adding opportunity that then that business development person would work, as we talked about before.
Yeah, which is basically you're saying there's just a lot we can't make you do in your agency. We can't carry those sales across the line. We are kind of your support, right? To give you those leads, you got to sell them, convince them, lead them, show them your value. And so I guess you've found there's a certain size agency that you get to do that best with. Well, and it also has a lot to do with the brands coming to you. You're like, we cannot give them the wrong agency, first of all. We have to have the roster of the right people for them. So that's why it sounds like you're real careful with what you're doing. So, well, that's cool. Well, Joe, as we wrap up, is like in our show notes, could we put out that can we put a link to that marketing report you did that Ad Age picked up? Okay, is that like public on your site?
Marketingrelationshipsurvey.com.
Okay, we got on .com for it. That's cool.
Marketingrelationshipsurvey.com. And then, of course, setup.us is where you can find all kinds of information. There's particular information for agencies and there's information for clients. And we sort of bifurcate the path that when they come to the site, if you're an agency, you'll see there's some services for agencies. And if you're a client needing agency support, then they're listed there too.
Okay, very cool. Well, Joe, thanks for hanging out with us and talking about setup.us. I think that's your site, you said. Appreciate you joining us and giving us some insights about the agency market. It's pretty fascinating things we talked about. So appreciate you being on the show, man. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Jason. I always enjoy talking to you.
All right. See you, man.